Hello, it's Professor Parish, and welcome back for week 6, I believe. Scroll down here, make sure. Yeah, already. Week 6 already. We're already to drama, if you can believe it. We are past poetry, going into drama. Crazy. So, looking ahead here, we are going to go over a couple of things, specifically the drama, presentation, the guidelines, and then I'm not going to go over this one. There is an example essay if you want to look at it. I'm not going to pull it up because all it literally is an example essay, so if you want to click on it, go right ahead. And then looking ahead, we just have week 7, week 8, week 9, and then we'll have week 10 and finals. So we are getting down to the wire already. This class is flying by. So week 6, we're going to talk about these first 2 chapters of drama, the drama preview and Greek tragedy. We are going to review the paper 3 guidelines, and then currently we're going to talk briefly about the assignments. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our course content. I am going to be working this week to grade your paper 2. I've already graded a couple, so you may have gotten them back with my grades. As we've done with paper 1, you will get a chance to revise paper 2, so just kind of be on the lookout this week and this weekend for me to get those back to you. But the revisions are going to be due next, not this weekend, but next weekend. So by this weekend, you'll get your papers back, and then by next weekend, if you want to revise, you will have that option. So, drama, we don't spend a whole lot of time on drama for a number of reasons. The main reason being that this is not the only class we have that focuses on drama. We also have Intro to Drama, which is English 243, and once you're done with this class, you are welcome to take it. It has English 122 as a prereq. And we also have Intro to Theater, which you can take anytime. So, because we have 2 specific classes devoted to drama and plays, this class will highlight everything and we'll talk about the terminology, but we don't spend too much time on drama, just because you have those other opportunities and other classes that you can take to kind of, if you want to learn more, you can take those courses. So what's due this week? Well, our thesis and outline for paper 3 is due, and I'm going to talk about the paper 3 guidelines here shortly. The week 6 discussion forum is due. The posts are due by Friday, April 12th. Discussions are due Sunday, April 14th by 11:55 p.m. And our reading response, our final reading response, is due this coming Sunday. I do want to note something about our reading response, though, before we dive into paper 3 and our drama assignment. I'm going to pull up the guidelines. I had a student point this out earlier, and they are correct. There is a typo. Let me show you on here. Alright, so, if I can ever get it pulled up. So for our reading response, what you're going to do is watch these 2 videos. They're not very long. They're only about 6 to 8 minutes each. One discusses the plot for Antigone, and one discusses the plot for Shakespeare's Hamlet. And in all honesty, the Shakespeare Hamlet one is very thorough and good. The narrator's voice is the most dry British voice I've ever heard. So please bear with me. And it's from SparkNotes. I know, an English teacher using SparkNotes, blasphemous, but I really actually like this video because of how thorough it is. So just bear with the narrator. He's really boring to listen to. If you want to listen to this while you're doing laundry or something, totally understand. But after you're done watching the videos, you're going to answer these 4 questions about it. Please note there's 2 typos. One is obviously this assignment is not due October 28th. I forgot to alter it from my fall class. It is due this Sunday, April 14th by 11:55 p.m. The other typo is that in question 1 it says, what is the defining term from our textbook sections on Greek tragedy and Shakespearean drama that can be applied to these 2 plays? Give an example term that applies to each play and explain how. So instead of it saying term for a second time here, it should say play. Okay? Otherwise, the questions are pretty much straightforward. It's our last reading response, so make sure that you're using complete sentences, paragraph form. There should be a brief introduction and conclusion. If you've done that on reading responses 1 through 3, you'll be fine. All right. So that leaves us with talking about paper 3 and drama. So I'm going to go ahead and go over the paper 3 guidelines because honestly this drama paper is probably our easiest paper in terms of formatting. It's very straightforward. You can pick any play from our textbook. Our textbook has tons of different plays. It has Hamlet, it has Raisin in the Sun, it has Antigone, it has Death of a Salesman. I mean, it has a lot of classic plays. But if you have your own playbook or you have your own play that you'd rather write about, you can use that as well. Totally up to you. I mean, we have about 800 pages worth of plays in our textbook, which is a lot to choose from. After you select a play, obviously you should read it, or if you pick an exceedingly long play, you are free to find summaries, analyses, video reviews, film adaptations, etc. to help you answer the following parts. You should have a variety of options depending on which play you choose. Most plays have a film adaptation or at least analyses of it that you could probably find on YouTube or, you know, in a journal to cite. Your paper should basically do these 3 things. It needs to analyze your play in terms of character, setting, and theme. Who are the characters? What is the setting and time period? And what is the theme of the play? And it should stand out. Your play, what makes your play stand out from other plays? You should talk about it. What type of play is the play that you picked? Is it modern American? Is it classic Greek theater? Is it Shakespearean? Is it a combination of tragedy, comedy, intrigue? What would you categorize it as, and how does it fit into this category? And I want you to give examples from the play itself. And finally, what drew you to the play, and what should readers take away from the play? So there's a lot of opinions in this paper, but it is very straightforward. It is 3 full pages, which I think that by the time you answer all these parts, you will definitely have, including an introduction and conclusion. Should be an essay format with an intro and conclusion. You will need to use citations for this paper. So from this point on in the class, we are going to delve deeper into citations, into using them in papers 3 and 4. You'll need to cite your textbook, the Discovering Literature book, because you're going to be talking about play terminology and drama terminology. If you got your play from our Discovering Literature textbook, that's the only source you really need to cite unless you use outside sources. Now, if you got your play from a book that you own, you need to cite that book. So just be mindful to cite all of your sources in MLA format and to have a separate page for your works cited and to include in-text citations in the paper itself. You are going to get to revise this 3rd paper. Now the 4th paper you will not get to revise, but this one you will. So just keep that in mind. As far as due dates go, the thesis statement is due April 14th, along with your outline. If you've done the thesis and outline for papers 1 and 2, you know the drill. You know how it should be formatted. If you didn't make those assignments, then go to our resources page, and there is a thesis and outline guideline to show you how to organize that assignment. And then the final draft is going to be due Easter Sunday, April 21st. So, like I said, we don't spend a ton of time on drama because I really want to give us more time to worry about the research paper, but we do spend enough. We're going to talk about 2 of the chapters today and round out with drama next week. And then obviously no late papers accepted. And then here's a breakdown of the points and how that works. Okay? Simple enough, right? I honestly think students think that this paper is the easiest out of the class because it's so traditional in its format. The poetry paper is always a little different and can be hard for students to adjust to. And then in a few weeks we're going to talk about the last paper, our research paper, and that is a totally different paper than anything you've ever written before. So get ready for that. It's going to be fun. But for right now, drama paper, pretty straightforward. Okay. So, let's finish up this week and talk about the first 2 chapters of drama in our book, which are chapters 26 and 27. And then we'll finish up with 28, 29, and 30 is a fairly short chapter next week. So, Drama chapter 26 is our preview, and it mainly talks about the difference between live theater, film, and traditional text, aka books. And there's quite a bit of difference. When I was at SIC, I did plays that the theater performed and put on. I did plays in high school. I can definitely tell the difference between reading a book and interacting in a play. It's a totally different experience. And then when you watch, one of our discussion forums, I believe it's this week's, uses a video to talk about the difference between film acting and theater acting, as John Malkovich is going to talk to us about in the video. But there is a distinct difference, and the main thing is that theater involves a performance aspect. It involves you getting up and performing on stage. It involves, once a play starts, you can't really stop it or put it on pause. It has to keep flowing and going on until its end. There's just a lot of differences, and our opening chapter, chapter 26, talks about these in detail. We've talked about interior monologues in the fiction unit. And this chapter expands upon that to show the differences between soliloquies and monologues. And the way I remember it best is that a soliloquy is an entire scene of dialogue. So, in Hamlet, for example, Hamlet has an entire scene to himself, talking to himself about his plans. That is a soliloquy. Whereas a monologue is just a moment. So I'm like soliloquy, scene, monologue, moment. It's just a moment of internal dialogue. Like in the middle of a song. Like, okay, in Beauty and the Beast, Belle, the opening song to Beauty and the Beast. Belle's walking through town. She's talking about all the townsfolk. Gaston has this kind of interior monologue where he sings. You could say he's singing to LeFou, but is he really? He's mainly singing to himself about how great he is and how much he deserves Belle. It's kind of it's kind of a monologue, sort of. Go back and watch that scene. Yeah, LeFou's standing there, but he kind of lingers away from LeFou and starts just going off in his own little world about halfway through the song. So I would classify it as a monologue. Now, what him and LeFou do in Belle is they also are performing an aside for parts of it. And an aside is when characters speak in private on stage but away from everybody else. So LeFou and Gaston are clearly amongst the townsfolk, but they're kind of by themselves talking about Belle and her father without anybody else listening. That's an aside. And then a confidant is the secret keeper in the play. So LeFou in the song Belle of Beauty and the Beast would be the secret keeper because Gaston confides in him his love for Belle and his plans. All right. So my favorite terminology in drama is foil. I love this term. And if you are a mathematician, you're probably thinking, oh, foil, that math term. No, this is a totally different term. I say that because a few years ago, this term will be on your final exam, and I had a student that was real cutesy, and they gave me the math definition instead of the drama definition. They did not get credit, but I did write them a little feedback message that was like, that was cute, but not right. Foil is when you have two large personalities playing off one another. So my example would be a buddy cop movie, where you have the strict, stern, by-the-book cop, and then you have the wild, young, rapscallion cop. It's kind of like Men in Black. You've got Tommy Lee Jones's character and Will Smith's character. That's a foil. They have two big personalities, but they're very different, and they play off each other really well. I would say any buddy cop movie has that same dynamic. In Harry Potter, it's Harry and Draco Malfoy, two big personalities that play off one another. Sherlock and Moriarty, or even Sherlock and Watson, two different personalities that are both really big and can play off one another. A lot of characters in plays are complex or multidimensional, so they're very much like the rounded characters we talked about in fiction. And then throughout the play, typically your main character gains what we call recognition, or a self-realization as the play goes on. Like they realize something about themselves that they didn't know, and it affects the plot. An idiom is a common phrase of a culture or language. I actually had two friends, when I transferred from here, two of my college friends, in the summers, they would teach this group of South Korean students English, or they'd help the English instructor. The English instructor was also Korean, and he taught the English part of the class mainly, and then my two college friends, they were responsible for teaching these South Korean kids idioms and how idioms were used in American culture. So for example, if I say I'm just kidding or just joshing around, it means I'm joking, I'm not being serious. But my friends said that they had the hardest time explaining idioms to people that are not from American culture, because they said it was really hard for them to understand. They'd be like, what does joshing around mean? And to explain to that, they'd be like, okay, sure, that's weird. But it's a cultural difference. And every culture has certain idioms of their language that are kind of like little inside jokes that a culture understands. So those are often in plays. I would say Shakespeare is really known for using idioms, and that's why his plays can be really hard to understand, because a lot of the times the idioms used are so far removed from modern culture that if you don't have the historical context, you're not going to get them. I would argue that. So on page 1138, let's look at Don DeLillo's The Mystery at the Middle of Ordinary Life. So if you want to pause this video and read that play, it's very short, but go ahead and pause this video and then read it, and then come back and start the video. Okay, you're back? So yeah, Don DeLillo's play here, it's really short. It's what we call a one-act play, where it uses the elements of storytelling for just one simple scene. But yeah, the elements, it reminds me a lot of Ernest Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants, because the dialogue is seemingly empty at first, but as it goes on, what do you all notice? We notice that a middle-aged couple, they're going through a midlife crisis. They're saying that life is pretty routine, it's perhaps boring, but it's very similar. It's part of them, so they can't really get out of it. They can't escape it because it's what they've become accustomed to and they don't want to leave it. So it is very much like Hills Like White Elephants in terms of these two characters being seemingly empty but complacent. And so I think it's a good example to compare to that. And it leaves enough open to interpretation that I think we as the audience can get a different level of meaning out of it. And that leads us to the idea of internal versus external content and conflict. Is it in the mind or in the world? Because Don DeLillo's play here, The Mystery at the Middle of Ordinary Life, clearly there's an external conflict, and that's that this couple is bored with one another, and they seemingly have nothing to talk about. The internal conflict is the idea of complacency, of being stagnant, of not knowing what to do, of settling, perhaps, or perhaps they're just content, and maybe they can't verbalize that. So there's different things to think about, but we do have our internal in the mind versus external in the outside conflict to talk about. A deus ex machina, or deus ex machina, it's Latin for God machine, and in Greek plays, this was a plot device that would get characters out of danger at the last minute. With Greek plays, it usually was a god or goddess that came down and swooped and saved the characters, maybe in a big chariot or something like that. We actually see deus ex machina used a lot in modern cinematography and modern books, to a shocking extent. Like I said before, I have younger cousins, so I end up watching or have watched a lot of Disney and kids films with them. I can name off several right now. Toy Story 3. Spoilers. If you don't want to hear spoilers, don't watch this part. Maybe skip ahead 10 seconds. But the little aliens save the toys at the end. Where'd those aliens come from? How'd they get the crane claw? We saw them like once at the beginning of the movie and never again. Deus Ex Machina. Jurassic Park is probably my favorite Deus Ex Machina, where the main characters are about to get eaten by the raptors, and then the T-Rex like swoops in and grabs the raptor and like throws it against the skeleton. It's amazing and totally a Deus Ex Machina. How'd that T-Rex get into the building without anybody hearing him? Who cares? But you see them a lot in different movies. Anything that just comes in and saves the characters at the last minute is a Deus Ex Machina. And on your final exam, I will ask you to give an example and explain that term. It's probably one of my favorite questions on the exam because I like seeing what everybody comes up with. Subplots happen a lot in plays. They're just extra small plots that can move the play along, or maybe they don't even connect. Maybe they're just to give characters extra depth, to give them something to do, to write them out of the script if you need them to leave. Like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, they're kind of written out of Hamlet, and then at the end they end up getting hung. But yeah, so subplots, they serve multiple purposes in plays. An ode is a tribute or pays respect to a subject. Often it's sung by the chorus in a play or group of singers. And then we have what are called rhymed couplets, which are 2 lines in plays that end in rhyme. There are some Shakespearean plays that are rhymed couplets. Our textbook also has some examples of these, if you want to look at those. But yeah, basically where your play ends in a rhyme. And I would argue Beowulf was a poem, but kind of reads similar to a play in terms of rhyming in the original translation. So, chapter 27, Greek tragedy. And I know some of this gets cut off, so I'm going to go over it. But Greek tragedy is chapter 27, and this is kind of the era where drama and plays first began to take shape and build. So in ancient Greece, plays were not like what we see today. They took place in large, flat, or slightly elevated open auditoriums, meaning there's just a stage in the middle and just seating all the way back. So there's that. There were not elaborate costumes, there weren't props, there wasn't any like type of set changes. It was just a group of people wearing robes, and to differentiate themselves, they often had large masks, whether if they were made of mache or clay, or they were just large props or masks that differentiated them from the character next to them. And then there would be a chorus, which the chorus usually gave the exposition in the form of song. So it was a very different type of play than what we see now. But they often had elements that we still use today. Probably the most common would be that of the messenger. So if you know the phrase, don't shoot the messenger, don't kill the messenger, in a play, typically the messenger was the person that delivered news to characters, and often it was bad news. So your audience would get mad at the messenger for bringing all this negativity into the play. Genre was introduced, and that was types of writing. So there were different genres of plays. The 2 most common genres, though, of any play are either tragedy or comedy, and our book talks about that. We say Greek tragedy because I think more Greek tragedies are known than comedies. And comedy itself was a lot different than it is now. Greek comedy is extremely crude and kind of vulgar in places, oddly enough. You would think that it would have been more conservative and then have gotten more, open-minded as it goes. But no, it was pretty crude humor. In terms of building plot in a Greek tragedy, the complication is where the actual problem starts. So do you remember in fiction we had our little roller coaster of plot building up to the climax, and then we have a resolution? Well, the complication is right where that roller coaster first starts going up. The complication is that starting point, what the problem or starting conflict is. The denouement, I always called it denouement when I was in college because I'm a hick, and, or no, I'm not a hick, but because the word and it being French was lost on me, I called it denouement. It's denouement, it's French. But it refers to the unraveling of the plot towards the climax. So that building of the plot like a roller coaster going up, that's the denouement. That's building the tension, unraveling the plot towards the climax, and then the peripety is the twist that often happens right at the climax, the twist in the play. So, and then finally you have catharsis, which is a cleansing of emotion or feelings. So I'm going to use the example of Oedipus. If you've never read Oedipus, it is the Greek tragedy about this prince who was prophesied from birth to be the murderer of his own father and someone that was going to marry his mother. Yikes, times 2. So his parents, upon hearing this prophecy, they realistically and quite frankly freak out about it and say, oh no, we're not going to let this happen. We're going to send our kid away, and that way he won't do anything to us. So they send him away. Oedipus grows up not knowing his parents are king and queen. and heads toward and decides to go traveling once he's old enough, and decides that the most reasonable place to go would be the kingdom, where his unbeknownst mother and father are living. So as he's traveling there, he actually meets the king on the road. They get into a fight. Oedipus ends up killing his own father, not realizing it's his father. Well, long story short, Oedipus goes to the castle and ends up marrying his mother, who does not know that he's her son, and he does not know she's his mom. They have kids together, and that's where Antigone comes in. The play Antigone is actually a sequel to Oedipus. Antigone and her siblings are the kids of Oedipus and his mom. Yikes. But the peripety in the play is that the prophet comes back and says, oh yeah, you're Oedipus, and you did what was prophesied, even though your parents tried to have it not happen. And the purging of emotions and feelings of Oedipus is that Oedipus is so mortified and horrified by this that he gouges his own eyes out. Like you do in Greek tragedy. So all of these examples and all these terms are usually acted out within a Greek tragedy, and usually by the ending of it, there's a purging of emotions, and they tend to end very sad. So there you go. Also available in Greek tragedies were these terms, the main one being that every character in a Greek tragedy has a tragic flaw, a fatal weakness. Usually it's hubris, which is just a Greek word for pride. It's the pride of the character. They say the phrase pride goeth before the fall. That's where this comes from. It's basically the character's pride ends up being their downfall. Pathos, if you looked at ethos, logos, and pathos in English 121, you would know that pathos means the emotional appeal or the emotional rhetoric. And in Greek tragedy, it's also a word for suffering. All right? And that leaves us back to antagonist versus protagonist, which we've talked about antagonist versus protagonist in fiction. And it's very much the same in drama. It's just the protagonist is our main character, the antagonist is the force that is trying to oppose them. And usually in Greek tragedy, it is an actual person. Okay. So, we're going to stop before we get to Shakespearean tragedy, but we're going to come back to Shakespearean tragedy next week, and then finish up from there. So, yeah, so that's Greek tragedy and our drama preview. Just to go back through the discussion forum for week 6, I do believe that it is, yeah. So the discussion forum this week is going to have 3 videos. One talks about John Malkovich discussing the differences between play and film. One is talking about the Globe Theater, and the other one is just expanding more on drama itself. So watch those 3 videos, and then it's going to be explained how they're used in this. And we do talk a little bit about Chapter 28 in this discussion forum, or you can at least make it an option. So if you want to actually go back to our drama presentation, you are welcome to go ahead and look at Chapter 28. It's on Shakespeare if you want it to help out with the discussion forum, but that's totally up to you. You can use terms from Greek tragedy in the preview chapter if you want to instead. All right. So that's pretty much it for this week. I'm going to be reading your papers and reviewing them and getting them back to you this week, so stay tuned for that. I hope that you all have fun looking through these plays and picking which one you want to do. If you have questions before you turn in the thesis and outline Dropbox, just send them to me. Just send me your questions and I will be happy to answer them. All right. Otherwise, I'll talk to you all soon, and I look forward to seeing what Paper 3 is about. See you all.